Work on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me is David Morassutti. David, how's it going, bud?
I didn't get the turtleneck memo for this one.
It kind of just happened because it was a little chilly and Frank was feeling a little under the weather, so he figured, okay, put the turtleneck on. Uh, yeah, it works fine. It works fine. I like the turtleneck. It works for me. So you do you like wearing turtleneecks? Is it something that an option that
I'm
you
not
would
big.
consider?
You know what? I'm not big on things like getting tight on my neck.
Uh-huh.
Like I used to love wearing turtlenecks growing up. It doesn't suit me really.
Okay. I'm not sure that suiting is that important. I think it's more important that okay, I think I'm leaving.
Uh-oh.
I think I'm leaving. Am I going somewhere? So
Apparently.
how many shows have a head hosting a show? How many shows?
Not too sure.
I'll put the body back. Having trouble with my camera. Ask me if I care.
I was gonna say
It doesn't. Anything that distracts people from having to look at me, I think, is a good thing. All right. Okay. In all seriousness, we saw. I think we'll start with this and see how far this goes. This lasts. The commissioner finally has spoken. He did a bit of a tour. There was some sort of interruption in his tour across Canada. I don't remember him seeing him do anything. I think he might have done something in Montreal, but I believe he didn't do anything in Ottawa, didn't do anything, maybe even in Hamilton, but I know he didn't do anything in Toronto, at least that I heard of. But
I
he
don't
did
think
some stuff out west.
No, he hasn't. He did he did Calgary, he did Saskatchewan, he did Hamilton. He didn't do Toronto. No.
No, I don't think so. So, the Vancouver Province, a newspaper out there in BC, had an opportunity to ask the commissioner a bunch of questions. Now we've had a chance to look at it. Where would you like to start?
I wasn't too impressed with what I was hearing from the commissioner. I don't know if it was the questions that were being asked, or if it's just it just I didn't see anything where he's saying we definitely need to fix this. The one that got to me was how will the resurgence of the XFL and the USFL impact the CFL? That one there, he thinks other leagues have come and gone. None of them have survived. We've been around an incredibly long time. We're going to play our 109th Grey Cup in Regina. We've been around a long time. That is a time for us to focus on our plans, and that's what we're going to do. Like, to me, that speaks to somebody who's like, we've been here for so long. We're not worried about our future because, and I'm like that can change. That changed a little bit during the pandemic. Being around for all those years didn't get you the federal funding that you were looking for when you went to the government, right? It hasn't led to people in I would say the big cities like Toronto and Vancouver to respect.
In Montreal.
Montreal's been better. They've been getting over 20,000 the last few games, but for the longest time, yeah, for a good stretch of time, Montreal was there too. Where the CFL is not the top mark. It's not. Look, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg. Okay, I don't. Okay, I guess we can put Edmonton in there. Would you put Edmonton there? Calgary, to a degree, like they don't have to deal with what Vancouver, Toronto, even Montreal have to deal with, which is it's the big city. There's other options for their entertainment dollars, right? Edmonton doesn't have. I was thinking about this the other day. Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatchewan, and Winnipeg do not have an MLS professional soccer team that they have to compete against. Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver do. Toronto has obviously the wealth of different teams, but I just think there's too much complacency in the CFL. There, I don't see a commissioner right now that wants to put forth ideas that are going to bring in a newer generation of fans. It's just pandering a little bit too much to what's worked in the past and keeping the fans that they have right now happy.
I'm glad you said that because, well, I was going to say that this interview speaks to a lot of status quo,
Mm-hmm.
and the status quo at this point in the CFL world, status quo isn't going to work because we can talk about how you know half the teams are doing well, but we have to also consider the half of teams that are having some issues for various reasons. Obviously, the East is an issue, no doubt about that. Um, when we talk about expansion into, my favorite is expansion into Nova Scotia, which is the favorite place for the Canadian team to go if there's a new team. He talked about 10 being a good number. Yeah, this is all good, but I don't hear or see anything that speaks to, okay, here's how it's going to happen. Um, almost every question doesn't have a plan attached. Am I
Well,
exaggerating,
the
or
big one there,
you know what I
the
mean?
big
Like,
one there, Frank, is there's not a timeline set for we want to have a team by this year.
yeah, why?
That just to me, it's funny because in the interview the question was this has been percolating or coming around for 20 years, and
Yeah,
so he's like
absolutely.
we're really gonna make sure that we're measuring twice and cut once in terms of getting it right. And the guy in the the response was, "But you've been measuring for 20 years now." Like
Which is a reasonable comment based on his response,
it's 20
and that's the
years.
point.
Like I didn't realize it was that long. Personally, I didn't know it was 3
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and they were deeply involved um, in all the Grey Cups. They've been to everyone recently. They've still been involved. The last one was one that I'll say would be an unfair judge of the group. But the fact is, the pandemic pretty much it killed almost any hope of that team in many people's minds. Not just the fans, not just the people in Nova Scotia, but I truly think even the organizers and the people who were hoping to have the franchise, they were sight unseen at the Grey Cup. There was a fella hosting an event talking about, but he didn't have anything to do with the ownership part of it. He was just somebody who was a fan of the team
Mhm.
essentially, and talked about, they just so they had at least the opportunity to hear someone talk about that franchise. You were there. I was there. We saw it, and we understood. We were told that he had nothing to do with the ownership group, and the ownership group's been involved with that, that franchise becoming real for over a decade. So it's not something that is new, in the situation. It's something that's been going on for a long time, and the fact that it hasn't developed has a lot to do with the pandemic. Let's
Yeah,
be clear. I've said that the pandemic has been an issue in the Canadian Football League this year because of finances that didn't exist, and they had trouble finan they've had we're in trouble. I'm going to say we, because I'm a CFL fan and I promote this league as best I can, and I have all the faith in the world that this game can continue to exist. But that doesn't mean it doesn't take body shots, and the pandemic was a body shot. And in fact, in some ways, when they started talking to the XFL, I think that was an admission of a 10 count. You know what I'm saying? You know, they need something to get back on their feet. You know, to get back on their feet, to use a boxing analogy. But you know, this league, this game. We hear him in the interview talk about Canadian players today are faster, you know, more talented, better than any at any time, you know, in the history of Canadian players in football. But it's the game and how it's played that I think, David, is um, is something that needs to be seriously looked at. Right? We've seen some really good games lately. You know, scoring is what the CFL needs to be because it's what we all when we all think of the Canadian Football League. Um, you don't have to be that old to realize the Canadian Football League at its best is a lot of scoring. And if scoring doesn't happen in the Canadian Football League, many of us look at that as a failure of that game because it's what we expect. Now, is it a justifiable expectation? Is it something that we should maybe change our expectations, lower our expectations as far as goal, you know, whether it's field goals, touchdowns, points, right? I don't know. I think it's really important that the game look like it has in some games, like the Hamilton Calgary game, perfect CFL game. We'll talk about these games, and you know, we had three of the four games, David. I don't. We don't have to talk about the games. We don't have to interrupt this conversation, but only in the context of we had Montreal win 34-30. We had Hamilton win 35-32 and we had BC beat Winnipeg 40-32. Those are CFL scores. Those are great CFL games. Now, the lowest scoring game was Toronto 28, Edmonton 23. That's not a bad score, CFL standards and expectations. So the game, in my opinion, is in good shape right now. Where it stands today, if we take a snapshot, it's in good shape. So as far as Canadians in the absolutely, we talk about Nathan Rourke. We talk about the Twins, right? The
Yeah.
Twins are playing. They're key players in their first year.
Yeah.
So you know, there's no problem with the players, Canadian ones.
Hmm.
I don't think there's any problem with the American players that come up here. So at this very point and juncture, the league looks really good today, and I think, David, that might have something to do with the fact that it's taken the league this long, the teams, the coaches, the players, everybody involved in the Canadian Football League to get back to being the Canadian Football League. You know,
Yeah.
the Canadian Football League didn't have unlimited funds while the pandemic was raging, and you know, players, coaches, organizations were laying people off. You know, when I say here in Toronto, not that many people were laid off. It's because MLSC had the money to keep them playing. A lot of other teams skeleton staffs through the pandemic.
Yeah, no, I think I thought the pandemic was going to give this team the kick in the butt, the league, the kick the butt that it needed. I
I
thought it
think
was
it
going to
did.
make them,
I think it did.
in a way, it did, but I still think, I think they're being a little slow to react as well. In a way, like the play on the field's getting better as the year goes along, as you mentioned. I do believe that, but I also just believe that they hired an outside company to come in and do the marketing and try to draw ways to improve on what's been missing with this league in terms of generating interest. And it's like, why not listen to fans? Why not listen to those who go to games and have or that don't go to games and are sitting there watching at home rather than going on and watching the games, right? I hear, you know what? I hear it all the time from, certain fan bases that are like, where's the merchandise? Where can I go and buy merchandise for this league?
Walmart.
Bec- the best way to get people interested in your league is they see fans. You won't see many fans wearing CFL gear outside of the stadium.
Another
in
name, David Knott. Go ahead.
in the big cities. Like, Saskatchewan, there's actually they do quite well with
Oh,
their
they have a really nice store at the stadium, David.
and then a few malls in the city as well.
Yeah.
BC has some nice stuff, but you don't see it. People have to see it. They have to see others wearing it and say, "That's pretty cool."
Well, I hear that, and again, I don't want to belabor the point too much, but the fact is, hopefully, here's the hope that we all have: the teams that are financially getting a bit of an infusion financially because the season is moving along, the games are getting better, the playoffs are going to come. The TV ratings, we need to know that those are going to be okay. TSN, broadcasting the games are doing a good job, but they also, right? They they have they have to justify their investment when it comes to either paying for the rights or broadcasting, right? There's costs that are attached when creating a broadcast, right? So, when people say, and it's unfair really, when people say, look at the way the NFL does this, and I understand the saying that, but the reality is that the NFL has a lot of money to put into TV and what it can do. So what we need here in the Canadian Football League is a plan that basically is within budget, but we have to we have to see from the people that run the CFL and TSM, they have to punch over their weight. That's what they have to do. And if they do that, that's the most we can expect. We can only expect so much.
It's funny
Are
you
the
bring
broad
that up, though, Frank,
Mhm.
because in the article they asked them about TSN's basically, there's a
Monopoly?
broadcast deal with TSN, but they don't prioritize the CFL like they do other leagues. Now, I'll say this: could TSN do a better job of marketing the CFL on their brand? Yes, I do believe so. But there's a reason why they don't. And I think CFL fans need to realize why. And it's because the engagement in the other sports is higher, the interest is higher. So guess what? They can't justify giving, what you think that TSN should be giving in terms of a spotlight because because the eyeballs aren't there. That's how they because if the eyeballs were there, TSN would be giving to the CFL a lot more attention, whether it's on their website, in their daily TSN Sports Center show, on their social media account. You have to justify. That's what all the media companies are
I
doing.
hear you. So
So,
well, what I just said, and I'm going to read a little bit of what he said to that answer. I think TSN has been a very good partner, and I think we are a very good partner for them. I'll never back away from my belief that we have a very strong partner at Bell and TSN collectively. The things we talk about all the time. How can we do more? How can we do better? That's been one of the best parts of our relationship, especially in the last 18 months post pandemic. He says it without saying it. The elephant in the room is the past 18 months have been okay. Before that was a nightmare, and that's an admission by the commissioner that before that there was a problem. And what you're talking about is 100% true. And I'm going to say this, Dave, David, not to disagree with you, but to take more of a, if I can, a positive view. Not that you're doing negative. I'm just going to try. I'm just a more positive view. The 18 months that they've been doing this is the comeback of the Canadian Football League after its shutdown season, right? And as I've said, it had a financial effect on them. So now what we're talking about is the last 18 months they've gotten to do what is necessary to exist, right?
yeah.
So the question, what I didn't see here, and then after that is there is a willingness on both the league side and TSN side is to think outside the box. Think about how is it that we can work together to build something together that's going to be better and stronger than what we currently have. It's always going to be a work in progress. And we happen to be next door neighbors to a 5,000-pound gorilla. You can tuck your tail between your legs and run away from that, or you can say, we can be the funnest, fastest, most entertaining brand of football in the world. That is in our control. He's 100% right in that. So now, David, what I'm saying is that we're starting to see these last few weeks, last week, and I think we'll see it till the Grey Cup. We're going to see the kind of football that the Canadian Football League historically has had, that attracted fans and created a dedication and a loyalty to the game. We're going to see that. That's my prediction. Now, will I be right? I don't know. Do I have reason to believe that? Absolutely, I do. Because the evidence is there now in front of us when we watch these games. The games are far better now. We're not seeing those games 10-6. You know, that's what we're watching. We're watching 10-6. Give me a break. So that's on I want to, because sometimes I feel like I come across as negative when it comes to the Canadian Football League. And I just wanted to make that positive point. And I truly believe it, that the games have improved. And now what has to happen is the league has to build on that. And I still think that the commissioner is sitting on his hands, and maybe David, maybe what we're looking for, what you're looking for, what we're hoping to hear from the commissioner will be put out there during this next Grey Cup. But it's dependent on how this season ends, how much the league and the commissioner doing the talking can give us a better indication of what's in the future of the Canadian Football League.
I'm gonna bring up one more thing about the TSN issue, and this is not a TSN issue; it's a CFL issue.
Absolutely.
Continually to have the game on a network that you have to be subscribed to. Okay, I've always said that's a problem. The fact that only one network really has an interest in the league, that's the second problem. I, and the other is, where's the digital aspect? Because TV, I don't know if the commissioners realize this, but TV is not as prevalent as it used to be. Where's the digital ads? Where are you going to get people to look at in the interest of your league on this? I'm going to bring up my phone here. This little device over the TV. It's not the same as it used to be. And the other thing too is, you know, I don't think he realizes, like, back in the day, the games were on CBC for the longest time. A lot of people have CBC available at their home, even if they don't have the best cable package. A lot of people have CTV, which is what the NFL games are on. That's part of most cable packages, even if you don't have TSN. That's, I think, another issue the league has, is the visibility isn't there because they've put themselves in this small little corner. That's a league problem. That's not
Cottages, many of the cottages and places where people go in the summer do not have cable.
yes.
And back in the day, when I used to watch the Argos and I went to visit friends at the trailer, I didn't have to give up watching the Argos because I brought a portable TV, pulled up the aerial, put it on the CBC, and would be able to watch the game, or CTV, depending who had it. That's what you're talking about. And in a way, nowadays, more and more people are getting more data on their phones. More and more people are using 5G. And when we talk about 5G, we're talking about, broadband that's like we've never seen before, which means people like the Canadian Football League, entities like the Canadian Football League, the NFL, Major League Baseball, all of them now have an opportunity to really do some really interesting stuff. Because we see it with TSN. They have the 360-degree 5G. Where because what you're talking about, because you're not just talking about it being available on the phone. For it to be available on the phone is great, and that people watch it. I agree with you. But then there's another step that you haven't talked about yet, and you can talk about that further. But what I'm going to say is the technology could improve a lot. It almost gets to be as good as watching it on your couch, or maybe even better because of the way 5G works.
Yeah, I it's funny. This the first year that they were doing this for Leaf games. I think they do it in Montreal too, where you can you can like uh, move your camera around to where you want to watch it in the rink and all those things. It didn't work for me at first. There was a lot of glitches with it, but then when I saw, it, I was like, "This is actually kind of neat." But I think what the other issue with the C, and a lot of people have been very vocal about it, is that it feels stale, the broadcast. It just feels like, you know, I like it when the broadcast is at the game. I like it when the panel's at the game because it brings that kind of they're there, they're immersed in the action, right? You look at the NFL because that's the comparable in terms of entertainment, not like
That's a
money.
high
No,
bar.
it's a high bar.
That's a high bar.
There's a prime. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Well, now with the Thursday night games, Thursday 8:15, Sunday 8:15, Monday 8:15. Those are the prime time games. Those are the ones you gotta get your popcorn ready for. I think the scheduling has also really hurt the CFL just because it's been so all over the place. If they had dedicated time slots, on a dedicated day or 2 days, because you only need 2 days to play out the CFL schedule,
Absolutely.
and the one game that's their prime time game gets all the, like, that's the game that they really push in terms of getting the entertainment value. Because Hamilton Calgary would have been a perfect prime time game. you you know you have a different panel there, get the excitement of the stadium, the atmosphere, realizing how important this game was. There's none of that, real enough of that. There really isn't. There was, I think they were at where was the last game that they were at? They were there for Labor Day. I remember that. They were there for Labor Day in Hamilton. They've done a
Were
few.
they were they were they in Winnipeg for the Banjo Bowl?
Um they might have, they were in the
But
out
that's
west
the
again.
kind of game they would be at. I think that's about the lowest level of where they would show up of interest. Promotion interest. Yeah. Well, David, you're right about that. One thing's for sure. Let's move on from TSN. They do as
Yeah.
I have nothing. I have nothing to add about the TSN thing other than to say that I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer that somehow TSN and the CFL have to have a conversation about how do we make this league more interesting. And one thing that you said that's important to me, and it's not. I hope people understand. It's not because I'm dissatisfied with TSN and how they broadcast, but I believe it would be very helpful if another network jumped in and started doing broadcasts, and they could be competitive against each other and push each other, further into a better situation and create a better broadcast. That I think is the reason why you said about only one broadcaster. It doesn't have anything to do with being negative about TSN. It's about being motivated to be better. Competition breeds great things, and you know right now TSN does what it does, and it's only judged by what it does. It isn't judged according to how someone else does the same thing they're doing. And I think that's my only point that I would add to what you were saying.
Look, and this is, I'm not going to totally bash the TSN as well, just because they do put an investment into the CFL. They're a big reason why the CFL is still around, right? Like, if the league didn't have a good broadcast partner, they'd be in a lot more. They would be in big trouble. So I'll give TSN that they have done their best to support this league, and I'm not even putting the issues on them. I'm thinking that the league should be trying to drum up more interest and not tie itself. But that's not TSN's fault. That's the CFL's.
Real quick on the officiating front. He was asked about the officiating, and what he talked about was how can we expect. He alluded to Um, how can we expect referees to be 100% perfect when we only expect players to be 90, 93% perfect? His point is clear, but what I can say about this, what I want to say about the officiating, again, I don't want to sound like I'm being overly positive, but I'm going to give it a shot because I think it's true. And that is that a lot of the officiating changes that were made by the Canadian Football League in recent history have led to better officiated games. All right. I want to make sure you and everyone else understands what I'm saying. The games, if you look at the games this season and compare them to 6, 8 years ago, we have less issues with at the end of a game than we've ever had before. So for me, I want to judge officials not for every play that they make, but the game that they have. And
Mhm.
as far as I'm concerned, the officials have played better games now than they have in the past, and it's been helped by the league, the teams, the people that make decisions about how the game is being officiated, because now we're arguing about silly little things. For example, I'll give an example. The officiating is getting good enough that we get coaches that are making challenges. Remember, frame of reference. All the whenever they throw a challenge flag, it's based on what they think the call should have been. I find, color me purple, orange, green, and any other color you want. But I find that it's getting harder and harder for coaches to overturn penalties. That's a good thing. That tells me they're doing a better job. And that's the whole point of having the challenges in the first place. It's the same concept that I said about TSN being the only broadcaster. Because you've got a challenge against a group of people who are being put in a position where they're now accountable for their production, for what they do. And because of that, we have better officiated games in the Canadian Football League today as opposed to 5, 8, 10 years ago.
I think out of all the things that the CFL, you could ask the CFL if whether it could be better, officiating would be on the lower end of my list. I really do think the officiating, yeah, you're going to have officials are humans. Humans are going to have bad performances. We've seen if a CFL team can have a bad performance, the officials can have a bad performance. That's just the way it is. And the CFL has done a good job to safeguard that with challenges. I really do think that. I think you're totally right that with the way that the challenges are done, and especially in the final moments of the game, you're taking that burden off the coaches, and it's on the command center. It's not going to be perfect, and that's why they can review games and say we need to be better on this. But I think out of all of them, I've had the least amount of problems with the officiating. It's not perfect, and it's never going to be perfect. So let's try to stop being perfect and just be consistent. That's the important one.
Again, my analogy where the officials have to play a better game. We can't worry about every play. We have to look at the game film and see how the game went. And as far as I'm concerned, they're doing a much better job. I'm sticking to that. And I'm going to repeat it again. And I'll have a lot of people that will be angry with me saying that because it's easy to beat up on officials, but we're not going to do that anymore. I'm not doing that here anyway. The thing of it is, unfortunately, Randy Ambrosie, our commissioner, did not mention that. He did not mention how much officiating has improved over since he's been here and prior to that. And I'm disappointed in that. And this is why I'm a little disheartened that I hope the commissioner, when the Grey Cup comes, because he's going to have his moment to talk, to all the media, and he's going to answer questions, and he's going to make statements, and hopefully he gives us more hope, because if nothing else, the commissioner of the Canadian Football League should be the one that after he speaks, we should all feel better about the game. We should have an understanding of its being, the guardianship of the game. He's the face of it. Even if he isn't the guy that makes all the decisions, if we're going to even go to the point where, well, Randy Ambrosie really doesn't do anything. It's actually all the owners and the teams make a decision, and then he just tells everybody. Well, he's got to the league through him has to deliver a better message. This interview to me was just way too placid. There was no excitement in this interview, in my opinion. And to me, that's a disappointment, a missed opportunity, because he hasn't spoke publicly a lot. So for many of us, like you and I, this is the only thing we see that he's talking about, because we haven't been given a chance to ask many questions and understand, from his perspective, where we're headed and how we're going to get to the place we all want to see the Canadian Football League be.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? I think that the commissioner should always be prepared to answer tough questions and not be put in a position where it's a grant. Well, I'm not saying this is why they got the interview, but be prepared to answer those hard questions and be willing to have those hard questions be asked. We
Absolutely.
we saw that, and I think that's making yourself open and honest will go a long way rather than trying to be defensive and not as visible as they should be.
I don't get that, but that is what. Okay, let's leave the commissioner's interview there, and let's start talking about the playoffs. Let's talk. I want to start by this. Give you a chance to think about this. Who can win the Grey Cup this year? Here's my offering. Has there ever been a season where 7 of the 9 teams could win the Grey Cup, and I could make a valid judgment on all 7? And I'll start by starting with the teams at the very bottom. Ottawa right now, obviously, with that loss, the odds of them getting in the playoffs are very slim, if at all. So that probably gets them out of the running for a Grey Cup. Edmonton, the other team, right? They're not going to go to the Grey Cup. They won't make the playoffs. That leaves 7 teams now. 4 of them in the West. I wouldn't bet against either of the 4. Honest to goodness, I would not bet against any of the. I could see any of those 4 teams going to the Grey Cup and winning the Grey Cup. And for the East, I see 3 teams. If Hamilton plays the way they've been playing, and Montreal continues to play like they can play, and the Argos keep winning games they're not supposed to win, I can't see those 3 teams not having a great shot at winning the Grey Cup. 7 teams. If you're a league, I don't understand why this isn't what we're talking about. The people who are talking about the Canadian Football League, why aren't we talking about 7 teams could win the Grey Cup? 7 teams. Not because they're as good as Winnipeg or as good as Calgary or BC or Toronto or Montreal, but because the way the league has been played this year, each of those 7 teams have the opportunity and the ability to play really well. Now, I know people are going to say about Saskatchewan, and I might have a soft spot for them because I have a lot of friends in Saskatchewan. I'll be going there for the Grey Cup, I hope. I think that they could turn things around too. I said Hamilton could. A lot of Hamilton fans, I got messages from them saying, Frank, we're done, right? I said, no. And it made me write a little piece talking about all the teams. And that was my first sense when I wrote that. My first sense that we do have that many teams that could win the Grey Cup.
Look, we've seen it many times where the team that wins first in the division doesn't look for the longest time. It would almost guarantee a Grey Cup appearance. It's not the case anymore.
Nope.
It really isn't. We saw a Winnipeg team in 2019 finish third in the West. They went all the way to the Grey Cup and they won it. In 2021, last year, we saw Hamilton finish second, go again, play Toronto first. They went off to the Grey Cup. It does not matter where you finish in the standings. What
And I'll
matters
add another one. We watched Hamilton be the best team in the Canadian Football League, and they didn't win the Grey Cup.
that too exactly. It matters more about your form of play heading into the playoffs. And I will say this: if you are a Hamilton fan, I have been the biggest anti-Hamilton person by the way they played. If they play like they played against Calgary, Hamilton fans should be ecstatic because I don't think there's a team in the East that could beat a Hamilton team doing that. So,
Every aspect of their game was really good. That it wasn't Calgary playing badly.
no. Now, if you're a Saskatchewan fan,
It's a
you
little tougher.
only thing that Saskatchewan has to do is win and hope and pray that Hamilton loses one game. The Hamilton loses one game and you win out. Unfortunately, you have to be the Stampeders. Now, the Stampeders aren't playing for anything really.
Yeah, and
Uh,
they
they could still conceivably get second, but they've lost the ability to have their predict. They pretty much write their own destiny because a lot of what BC is going to do. Calgary might not. We'll see what they do in terms of how they come out the last two games. It might benefit Saskatchewan, but if you're Saskatchewan though, that loss against Hamilton was, I'm not saying it was a nail in the coffin, but what it did was it made a tough task that much harder.
absolutely, absolutely, and so in my opinion, as far as I've said how I feel, and I truly believe this, that there are 7 teams that could win the Grey Cup. And you said it appropriately, and I will put a period at the end of that sentence by reminding people that the Ottawa Red Blacks won the Grey Cup with a losing record. The Toronto Argonauts won the Grey Cup 500, 9-9, right? So, the fact that teams don't have to be dominant during the season and winning the Grey Cup is not impossible. And in fact, it's quite possible. So a team like Saskatchewan, if they get their Schmidt together, they could get into the playoffs. I mean, they'll have to come over to the East and do it, which is a very big. That's a difficult road. Western teams that get the crossover and come to the East have not had in recent memory a lot of success, and basically have looked like cannon fodder, unfortunately for them. So the road for Saskatchewan is going to be tough.
Yeah.
To get to the Grey Cup. It's their game. It's their home game. So I don't know if they can put pressure on themselves that's positive to get there, or is the negative pressure of a team that's had problems, with discipline, right? That could be their undoing.
Yeah, no, that's real. That yeah, there were so many games that ended in such a tough way for that Saskatchewan team that like you're not surprised by how many games that they just looked so out of it. Games that they should have won, they didn't win. You can't do that if you want to be a Grey Cup team. It's especially in the West. I understand that it's a lot easier path in the East, but this was a team that was top in the West for how many years?
2 years back to back
And
until
we said if Calgary's moving higher up, and they did not account for the BC Lions to be this good, and maybe there was a bit of complacency in that, in thinking that you could just go back to the same thing and hope for a different result. The result wasn't good for them.
Absolutely. So I guess we can draw this conclusion, and I apologize to my Saskatchewan Roughrider fans who have messaged me and said they've changed their allegiance to other teams in the Canadian Football League, because they really have lost hope with their team. If those people are right, and if Saskatchewan's the team that is out on the outside looking in, that still leaves us with the 6 remaining teams that are in the hunt for the playoffs. But if one assumes that Saskatchewan doesn't get in, we have the 3 Eastern teams and the 3 Western teams. I seriously, without a doubt, suggest that any of those 6 teams could win the Grey Cup.
Yeah.
That's even a more positive thing than the 7. The 7 is more of an outside thing. The 6 for sure. Can you say that Hamilton can't win the way they're playing? We both agree Oh, they can win. Montreal, Toronto. Who's going to say Winnipeg can't win? Who's going to say Calgary can't win? And if BC gets Nathan Rourke back,
Makes their odds even better because I don't think they're that not
you know,
far off.
I love I love these last few games are going to be an introduction to probably one of the most intense battles for the Grey Cup in a very long time. No one's going to have the nerve to suggest that there's going to be any kind of walkover, David. There's going to be no walkover. There isn't going to be a walkover in the division final. The division semifinals.
Mhm.
No walkover. Can you imagine Calgary and BC? That's not going to be a walkover. That's going to be a knock 'em drag out.
Mhm.
And I think, regardless of which team makes it to first in the East, the two left is going to be a knock 'em drag out. If it's Hamilton and Montreal, if it's Hamilton and Toronto, hello, or if it's Montreal and the any of the other two, and then the finals when that comes up, the two teams that win the semis and go to play against the number one team, the confidence that they're going to have, man, it's going to be fun, David. The last couple of games are going to be so. And the schedule maker, should we go find out who he is and buy him a bottle of champagne and thank him for we
I'm
looked
not
at
there yet. He's
okay.
the end of the season. It's been better,
Let's
but
forget about before now because we
yeah,
all agree that this was a dumb schedule when it started until now. But this might be the moment where the schedule maker gets the positive feedback that I think he deserves. And if let's color it this way: if he screwed up at the beginning of the year, and if he did really good, and if it really worked out great at the end of the year, we can forget about the beginning of the year, if you follow what I'm saying. So I'm in a forgiving mood and in a positive mood, suggesting that the schedule at the end of the season, it's telling a story, David. It's telling a story, and the story is win and you're in. Not, this is the beauty of this schedule that I love. As long as the team wins, they're going to be in the playoffs. That's what this is all about. These last 2 weeks. That's all it's about. You win, you're in. You don't win, you're out.
yeah.
I love it. Works for me.
Yeah. I know we only have a few minutes left. Can I just point out there was one thing I want to talk about with the Taylor Cornelius situation. I was hearing some people say, "Oh, how tough of him to play with a spleen injury that he needed to go to the hospital for. How tough of him." How about how bad that could have been if knowing that he had a spleen injury and he was out there playing. I think there needs to be a discussion right now that we shouldn't be rewarding players for putting themselves in that risky situation. Look, I'll give Taylor Cornelius credit for fighting off pain to try to get back out there and try to, because that game was still winnable for them even though they were down. But at the same time, we just went through a situation where the decision needs to be taken away from the players when it's a medical situation. I'm not giving a high five in that situation. I'm not giving props. I'll commend him for the effort, but I'm also going to say there needs to be a little bit of needs to be a discussion had about putting a player in that type of situation.
You're talking about education, where the players shouldn't be put in a position where they make a decision that overall is a bad decision as far as safety and the good health of all the players. This can't be a contest to see, okay, who can stay in with the worst injury. That's your point, and I agree with you 100%. There needs to be a ripcord, and I thought we had it with concussions, but apparently the spleen or any other part of a body now needs to also be emphasized as somebody has to take control of that situation, but they have to know what the problem is. If they don't know, David, that's another thing that maybe in this instance, it's not an injury that players have a lot. So there's not an understanding of the dangerousness. It should be known. Don't get me wrong, but it may not be. And if it isn't, then maybe risks are taken that we shouldn't take. And no player, No player should take a risk at a time when their body is susceptible to something getting even worse, and God forbid, fatal.
That's true. You don't want to put them in a situation where there's going to be some sort of like the league is put in a situation where, oh no, like no, you don't want to put them in that situation. Let's just say that.
Absolutely not. David, we got to go. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, he's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Candid Frank.